It's been a while, but I'm back. We're back. This is the Earth 16 Comics Wire podcast. I'm your host, Brian from Earth 16. Here's my co-host, Brendan Rootney from Brendan vs. Reviews. We're from the Daily Planet paper. And our guest is going to be Toben. How do we pronounce your last name?
Racicot.
Racicot. All right, cool.
Right.
So we have Toben Racicot, and we're going to be interviewing him on his comic Pilgrim's Dirge, which is about a man's quest to get back home to his family after being stranded on Earth, which is now a frozen planet, which is pretty much becoming Planet Hoth at this point. Um, and Brandon, or Tobin, how are you doing today?
I'm doing very well. Thanks for having me on the show. This is gonna be really fun. This is my first live interview, so we're gonna have lots of fun.
Awesome.
Nice.
First time for everything.
Absolutely.
So, can you tell us a little bit about Pilgrim's Dirge?
Yeah, of course. So there's lots of fun stuff going on in Pilgrim Dirge. So the idea originated from kind of a lack of anything fun going on during this one semester that I took off at university. The previous semester, it'd be fairly accurate to say I was pretty addicted to Destiny. If you've played that game, you know kind of what's going on with it. And so when I went back home and took the break, I didn't have any form of media or entertainment really. I just was working. So as a way to fill the void, I guess, I was like, what if I did something similar? And so I started putting together this kind of dystopia solar system. I taped two pieces of loose leaf together. I drew the sun at the top in a straight line, and I said, okay, where are all the planets? And I kind of envisioned, we find out a little bit more about it in the book, but envisioned somebody taking a pool cue and a cue ball and hitting them, and they all kind of go, and then we have to sort out where they all went.
Wow.
And so that was the first part of it. And then I grew up in the Great White North of Saskatchewan, Canada, and our winters are literally from September to May, or sometimes even June there'll be snow. And so the idea of living in a very frozen climate is very real in my existence. And so I thought, what if I do a frost punk, but not really frost punk, kind of thing to start out with, and kind of set the tone of this isolation and this loneliness of this kind of lone soldier trying to get back to where he wants to go.
Wow, that's amazing, and especially how you you used a situation like your environment, like your surroundings, to inspire your story. Especially, growing up in the cold of Canada. I mean, I heard that winters in Canada are really brutal.
Yes, they are.
Yeah, and that's why so many. I live in Arizona, and that's why we get so many of Canadians coming down here during the winter months because it's so much warmer here.
Yeah, all the snowbirds. That's right.
Yeah.
So, besides Destiny, are there any other fictional and sci-fi elements that you took upon for this series and foundational of it?
Yeah, that's a great question. So a lot of what I do structurally is kind of hero's journey, 5-issue things trying to tell the hero's journey within it. So a lot of that stuff, so Joseph Campbell architecture and archetypes and stuff are mapped out. This one specifically, and it kind of applies to Crown and Anchor, another book that I do, but Treasure Planet is very foundational in kind of the aesthetic. That idea of taking Earth nautical stuff and trying to retrofit it, or I guess future fit it, to try to make it go into space. So that kind of stuff I think about a lot of how would the tech actually work, and not just, oh, it works because I say it works. I try to make things functional. And then kind of, if you've read the first issue, so you'll know there's kind of a Treasure Island moment that happens to kind of set up the one quest. And so I try to find these tropes in other literature like Treasure Planet, or some people have referenced it as Green Lantern in the past, and try to do something different or unique with them. But definitely Destiny, Treasure Planet, and then as the series goes along, it gets a little more fantasy with some of the aliens we meet, and it kind of, just the quest nature of the adventure that we go on is a little bit more D&D than kind of the sci-fi tropes. So eventually we'll get into some other stuff, but these first kind of 2 or 3 issues are very kind of lean sci-fi, yeah.
Okay. I mean, that's pretty awesome. You're branching out, you're showing different genres and different types of connections to people. So like, okay, the first 3 issues are very sci-fi, then next it builds up to be very D&D. So it's kind of like this series has something for a little bit of everyone.
I hope so. And a lot of what I do now, like when I started reading comics, I was a very novice reader. I didn't get started in reading until I was 18, when I had enough pocket change to actually go to a store. And the store that I went to was an hour and a half away from my house, so I needed like an actual vehicle and license and stuff. So I started late, and a lot of it was a huge revelation, because I mean, I started with superheroes, but then I very quickly jumped out of superheroes into Image, and it blew my mind, the kind of genre merging. Specifically, I'm referencing something like East of West, where it's like a sci-fi western. And I saw that, and I went, you can do stuff like this? Like, I thought it had to be just kind of, in their own lane. And so I think about that a lot. If I want to do something sci-fi, what else can I kind of merge in there to make it more unique, or make it more aesthetically pleasing, or just interesting to readers? So it's not just like, oh, here's another sword and sorcery kind of thing, or, here's another just like straight up Halo kind of thing, or something like that. So trying to merge that, it's a challenge to write, but then I also think it's just more interesting to read, because you do get the blending of those genres and universes, and just fandoms as well. And I mean, D&D influences everything, right? You play Destiny, and you're essentially just playing sci-fi D&D, right? All the loot and all the levels up and stuff like that. So that kind of prominence maybe is a little bit reductionist, but I think that it's really influential because it allows you to tell quests and adventures and have some fun with it, which I think comics needs, again. It's more fun these days.
Yeah, it kind of reminds me of like Firefly with Nathan Fillion, which to me had it was ahead of its time. Like you had it was sort of like Star Wars though, but it was more like a Western. A galactic Western, and you had the Independents go against the this government, and which was comprised, I think, of the United States and China or something like that when they went out of space.
They all spoke Mandarin, right, as a second language, something like that.
Yeah, and it just took all those elements. You would think that it was like a actual Western, but then it's like a Western in space, which I thought was really amazing. When I first saw it, I was like, wow, this is really awesome stuff. And
just the way, weird, right?
Huh?
Because they kind of call Star Wars that as well.
They called Star Wars that, yeah. But Firefly took it up a notch.
Yeah, exactly. With really leaning into them wearing revolvers and stuff. Right?
Yeah.
The samurai lightsaber swords. It's actual.
It was very steampunk.
Yeah. Yeah, I like that a lot. That's cool.
So, speaking of the comic itself, Pilgrim's Dirge and all that, the story centers around Oren Daniels, the protagonist, and we learned that he defects from the Corps, which is, I believe it is the Celestial Orbital Reparation Effort, and he defects from this organization that he was once a part of and probably believes so strongly in. And during this journey, will Oren be battling any mental health issues like PTSD from his time with Core, as he tries to get back to his family, or due to his missing his family and all that?
Yeah, that's a great question. So, probably the simplest way that I can write any kind of thing about mental health is just kind of going through the grief cycle, right? It's very kind of cut and dry.
Yeah.
It's a structure. And we touch on that lightly, but mostly what Oren does is just avoid.
Okay.
So he doesn't want to talk about things. He doesn't even really want to think about things in the inner monologue captions and stuff that are written. He kind of hints at something, but he's too afraid to name it. He's too afraid to talk about it. In the second issue, we definitely dig into that more. He comes across somebody who may or may not know what happened. But again, he's very avoidant. And the other way that he deals with that is through his humor, where he kind of makes fun of his situation, or you're kind of in that first 5-page sequence where he's kind of role-playing with these aliens, right? Trying to make it a little less endangered than he is, or something like that. So it's touched on, and then there's definitely moments of healing throughout. But I don't think I actually went into writing it thinking I'm gonna, tackle this issue or tackle a subject of mental health. But the incident that caused him to defect and to kind of go into this exile in a way is definitely touched upon, and we expand upon it a little bit more. But yeah, that's interesting. I didn't go into it thinking I'm going to write about this, but it's there for sure.
Without diving into spoilers of the book, where do you want to take Orin? And like, where did the character of Orin come from? Like, you know how you have Luke Skywalker and like he's the loner, and like, you know, he's very introverted, and like he comes out of his shell, you know, he's the hero of the galaxy. What about Orin? Like, you know, he's like dealing with this grief and stuff. He really puts it aside. He lets his humor speak for him. So where do you like want to see that? Is he reflective of you? Is he reflective of someone you know?
That's a wonderful question. So when I had that semester off and I was putting together the story, the idea was that he was going to be a father of like, I think it was like 8 or 9 kids. And the idea being,
wow.
Well, if you're on Earth, what else are you going to do? Which is kind of terrible now looking back at it. But that definitely stayed true. Like, he's a family man through and through. We learned that the reason why he came to Earth was basically, beyond helping humanity get back to Earth. It was, he's a father, he needs to pay the bills, and this was an opportunity that he wasn't forced into, but it was kind of like, there's nothing else really going on, and we gotta put something on the table, and then it all falls apart. So I don't know if it would be reflective of me to bring D&D back into it. Orin, and I don't remember what the surname was. Orin was a character that I rolled way back in the day, one of my earlier characters, who was a paladin. So I think there's some kind of that characterization or mentality in him, kind of a paladin and wants to do good. And that might be a little bit where the kind of pilgrimness of all of this comes in as well. And stay tuned for what all that means. But I definitely think it's more relevant to me now as a father, being away from family. I know what that feels like, and I also know what it feels like to work really hard to support a family. So I would say, and it's ironic because I didn't write this recently. The scripts and stuff are done, and it was a while ago that this came about. So it was almost like self-fulfilling prophecy, maybe, or I'm not sure. But yeah, it's mostly a family man with, again, that kind of paladin architecture, archetype involved.
Okay. I respect that, I really do. And it's a very simple story to follow also, but it's also, that's the beauty of simple stories, is that they come off simple, it's one straight, narrow path, and then it's just complex, and it just blossoms from there. And I feel like with this first issue, you could probably have like a whole Star Wars universe, or like a whole Pilgrim's Dirge universe, and spin-offs and everything, and it's all up here, man. So, you're the writer.
Yeah. I think about this a lot when I write, because, I've written, a lot of the stuff I've already written is just actually getting made. But I've written I believe it's 40 issues. It was 60, I think we cut it down to 40. A sci-fi fantasy pirate adventure called Crown and Anchor, so that's one that I make with my wife, Alaire. And then Emulator with Emiliana and Tank, that one was funded earlier this year, and now this one. And so I have like a really long one on the go, and then these 2 short ones. And I think a lot about what Kieran Gillen's asked Jonathan Hickman. And they had an interview podcast about when Hickman released the Black Monday Murders. And Kieran asked Jonathan, do you write to be reread, or do you write for your readers to go backwards? And so if you know about Black Monday Murders, there's a lot of just like text pages with stuff highlighted to cover it up, right, kind of classified documents. And Kieran says, I don't read to have the reader go backwards. I basically write so that when they get a trade, it all makes more sense. And so I think about that a lot. But the nature of Kickstarter, you have to deliver a good single issue, otherwise there's no incentive for number 2, right? Like, even more so than going to a shop, dropping $5-6 on an issue and going, that wasn't really worth the money, I won't give it a shot. Like, there's so much more, I feel like, at stake when you're running Kickstarters. And so that's why this issue is a little bit longer, because as a consumer of comics, I get really upset when I drop my $5 on a 20-page issue and I go, there's one page that actually had some kind of value. So I've had a comment from a reader before be like, this is almost like too much. I'm like, yeah, because there has to be to make it worthwhile. And the point is, I want people to be able to read that first issue multiple times, And then when they get number 2, I want them to read 1 and 2 together, and then 3, 1, 2, 3 together, right? So like trying to orchestrate it so that it's not just like, oh, you have to wait for it all to be done by putting together each element and have a read through of it. Like it's hard to do, and I don't know if I'm going to land it. I'm really grateful that people will find so much enjoyment from this first issue, and hopefully I make it there. But for now, like I'm super proud of the response that issue 1 is having with readers. So I'm very grateful that you guys enjoyed it.
Yeah, I mean, like, you know, like what you mentioned with the issues and all that, though. I mean, it kind of reminds me of Star Wars War of the Bounty Hunters, where the first issue was very explosive if you read it. I mean, spoiler alert, I mean, it's revealed that Q-Ra is running the whole show, using the Carbonite frozen Han Solo as a pawn. And that was really explosive. And, you know, you kind of have to, like, not make it super explosive, but, you know, you kind of have to, like, add more. I think what I realized with that whole arc is just that you have to add more explosive elements. Like, it's one secret after another, like one reveal after another, in order just to keep the issue alive. Because, like you said, all it takes is one page in order to, like, determine the trajectory of the comic. And I think that's really good writing, in my opinion. And just like with, you know,
Go finish your thought, and then I.
Oh, just like with Pilgrim's Dirge, you know, I mean, we have that one, you know, we start to piece together of what his mission is, and you know, it kind of becomes explosive because at first we thought like, oh, is he going to be with Core again, or are they trying to go after him, you know? But then it's like, oh no, you know, this is something else. This is bigger than what he has done in the past.
So I was gonna say that another thing that Jonathan Hickman said that I think about a lot, because I went to school for creative writing and I was in classes with a lot of oh, awesome, with a lot of writers, and it was the do I remember what it was called, the Maze Runner problem, right? And I don't know if you've read these books; they were released a decade ago, but literally every page was, what's going on? Who am I? What's my purpose? Right? And Hickman said, the revelation of information causes more suspense than the withholding of information. And I think a lot of novice writers are really scared of dropping a bomb on page 1 or at the end of chapter 1 because they want this huge ending, right? They want the end of the book to cause people to go, oh, that was amazing. But odds are you're not going to make it to the end of the book.
Yeah, you have to build it up like it's like a scene in dialogue, or like when you're planting the seeds at the beginning of like a video game or a movie. It's that 3-arc specialty. Like then you have to like see it blossom, you have to see it flourish, and it's the same with writing. Like a lot of people in my class are like, oh well, I don't want to put like this bombshell here, and my professor's like, do it now, put it like as a monologue. Yeah, what do you have to lose?
Drop the bomb, dude.
Stop reading. Or they continue reading, and you want them to continue reading. That's the whole purpose of creating stories.
And it's the same with journalism. Like when you're editing and stuff. Like Brian's War of the Bounty Hunter reviews are fantastic. But like I'm editing them, and I'm like, Brian, you could put like a little oomph here. Like put like Hera, put like Vader, like the Clone Wars. Like he's looking at all the clones and stuff, and he's seeing the remnant. The soul of Anakin's being sucked out by the purgatory and what's going on inside. And Brian's like, yeah, absolutely. And our editor's like, who wrote that line? You know, as an editor, you give them the credit. So I'm like, Brian wrote that. Like, I just pushed him. And it's great because people are like, dude, this is great. 1, the writing's awesome. And 2, you really pull in your audience.
Man, I need to read that book series now. Well, I'll read the review first, and then I'll go read the series.
Yeah, and like a lot what you touched up on too, like holding the big reveals, it kind of reminded me of like what I learned in my creative writing classes too, and I kind of had like a knack for doing this during the time I was learning, you know, because I was pretty novice back then. It was still new to me. I learned that, you know, when it comes to like that big reveal, you can't go too fast in like the scenes or the dialogue. It's not like a movie. It's not sequential that way. It's just it you know, with writing, it's like it is, you need to like build and build and build upon. It's like, yeah, because I think a lot of people, you know, are afraid of doing that, you know, like just going fast into the scene because they want to get to that point, like they want to wow people, but you gotta kind of like put, you know, you gotta get from point A to point B, and then, you know, you can't get to Z all at once, you know.
And that's what I love about comics, because it allows you that control of the pace of turning the page.
Yes.
So when I create an outline, I take a piece of loose leaf and I write 1 to 20, 24, whatever, and I know all the evens are the first left-hand side and all the odds are the right-hand side. And so scripting out a scene or roughing out a scene, I know, are they going to turn the page and see something big, or is it going to be, where is it going to be when the book is open? And that's something you don't get in prose that I feel like prose lacks, is the control and pacing, and even you can break it down to panel size. You can have lots of small panels to kind of staccato all these little things. Like they do that a lot in like Hawkeye. Matt Fraction's Hawkeye was really good at kind of controlling your eye and stuff. But being able to do that, you can set up some kind of suspense, I guess, is not the word I really wanted, but some kind of suspense on the bottom of the right-hand page so that your reader's really anticipating when they turn the page, and then there's this beautiful reveal of something or someone or somewhere. Like there's a reveal. You turn the page and it's the one page splash, and it's like the space station that he goes to, kind of, right? Like I love that kind of stuff because it makes you pause and go, whoa, what is this world like that the buildings look this way, or that they're set in these locations and stuff. East of West does that beautifully. It just gives you a whole building and says, look at this environment, and pick up what you can from it.
I don't know if anybody's told you, but the book, the art is very invincible. It's very Robert Kirkman at times.
Weird. I haven't got that before. No.
yeah. Just wanted to say that. Like, I actually was at Terrificon over the weekend, and like I was looking at the comics, and like I opened it up and I saw Invincible's art because I've never read it. I watched the show, and the art is like, and I'm looking at yours. I was like, this is the same thing. Like this is really good. Yeah.
There's definitely a level of energy, and maybe Otley's coming from that side of things. I don't remember the kind of people that he looked at for his inspirations, but there's a level of energy in like Italian art that I don't see in any other culture. Maybe manga sometimes, but I feel like Italian artists they come from like a whole other mindset, and you can see that with this kind of, I would say, Italian invasion, harkening to like the British invasion that's happening like through Boom, right? You have all these Italian artists on Power Rangers.
Yeah.
Working with all these people from Italy and stuff. Like they see something that we don't in North American art, and maybe it's because of our fixation with superheroes, where it's like the body itself is
the aesthetic.
That kind of allows the reader to tap into that energy or that kind of thing. But the way that he draws, and especially too with Emiliana, like that's why I chose them, is because I saw their stuff and I went, yep, this is what I want the book to look like, and just immediately.
Speaking of choosing them, like what was the process of forming that team and all that, like behind the book and all that? How did you find the illustrators when creating this comic?
Yeah, it's kind of a boring story. It was honestly just Twitter. It was about this time last year. So when COVID hit, I think I was already doing it, but I made a goal for 2020 because, again, going through creative writing school and stuff, everybody was saying, you're not really a writer unless you write every day. And I was like, oh, shut up, we're students. We don't have time to write every single day. We're so busy. And I just finished like my master's degree, and I was starting PhD and stuff, and I said, okay, I'm actually going to make time to write. It's going to be the first thing I do every day. So I started writing every single day, and it was about this time last year, and I was just like cranking through stuff. And so I said, well, I'm not really doing anything with any of these stories. Why don't I throw a few of them out there? And so made a plan with my wife, set a budget, kind of stuff, and made some plans. And I was like, well, I don't know how to find artists, because all of the people I work with as a letterer, they're already employed, and I don't want to start poaching because I know how just overwhelming that can be, because my wife will work on 2 or 3 books at the same time, and that's very draining. And so I just went onto Twitter, and I found someone, I think actually it was an artist on Power Rangers, an Italian artist, and I said, well, if this is kind of an up-and-comer, right, they had a little bit less than kind of 5,000 subscribers, maybe even less than 4,000. I said, if this is kind of an up-and-comer, who's following them? who do I look for that's looking for, or to them for inspiration, and I would be that person. And so I started going through, and I think I found Emiliana first, and I said, yeah, this has good line work. I really like the faces she does. I think she's a great artist in terms of like body language and conveying emotion through looks and stuff. I think that's fantastic. And then I found Mateo, and the illustration that appealed to me was, honestly, it was just like a big mech. Like it almost looked like something out of Pacific Rim. And I was like, yep, that's what I want, because we're going to get funky, we're going to start doing robots, we're going to do aliens. Like, this is the person who can handle that. And so reaching out to them was pretty simple. I said, hey, I have this thing, it's done. You can read all 5 issues of it if you want. We're going to go through Kickstarter, right? I gave them the spiel, and then they slowly started picking away at it, because I wasn't planning to do anything with it until now, and they were busy doing other stuff as well. And then when it came to color, it was probably easier. So a friend from university that we made comics with before is coloring emulators, so that's Tank, and so that was really nice, because her and I work really well because we break down and understand a lot about palettes. So if you read that issue, like all the interior stuff is kind of this faint grayish blue, and that's supposed to represent like the absence of any kind of love or emotion in a house. But then you go outside and it's very vibrant to kind of contrast that. And then with Pilgrim's Dirge, I poached Martina from SideQuest, which I lettered.
I read a little bit of
Martina's a
SideQuest.
fantastic colorer. Pardon me?
I read a little bit of SideQuest, actually. Really fantastic story.
Thanks, yeah. So her colors just blow me away. And I know nothing about color. I've actually started trying to learn more about color so I can understand it better. And so I said, I have this thing working with Mateo, and she's like, oh, I love Mateo. And I was like, oh, of course, it's going to be a situation like that, where I imagine, well, maybe now it's a little bit different, but I imagine like the indie scene, Italy, although Italy's a lot bigger than I probably imagined. It's like the same thing. Growing up in Canada, people were always like, oh, I know somebody. Do you know this person? I'm like, Canada's,
Yeah, Canada's huge.
Yeah. Yeah. So she joined on, and with Tank, it was very kind of meticulous, because we wanted the colors to really lock in the kind of emotion and stuff like that. And then with Pilgrim's Dirge, it was a lot easier, because Mateo would leave notes for her in the files in Italian. And so I just said, yeah, go for it. I don't have any notes other than make it look good, and I don't worry about that happening. I know that's something from experience working with you on SideQuest, and what you see is what I got. So there was only one note that I ever had to give, and I think it was more just a very small detail where I think something wasn't colored that should have been, to kind of distinguish it a little bit more. And that was literally it. Was just, hey, this circle needs to be a different color to make sure that the reader knows what you're talking about. And that was it. It's a breeze working and making comics with these people.
No,
Yeah.
I mean, I just think it's awesome and stuff, like the art and stuff. It's ironic is that I go to school for like English, and I tried doing prose writing, and I was terrible at it.
It's hard.
It is. We had to do a 30 to 60 page novella.
Oh, dang.
I was terrible at it. But I'm a great poet. I'm a published poet. But I also love to do journalism. Like, I never thought I'd be doing this, sitting here and talking to you guys. And I did like a blog and stuff, and I was doing like movie reviews, and I did like a lot of DC stuff. And now I'm just here. Like, I love to do what I do. It's just like editing is great. So, like, what's the process with, like, your editing and stuff? Like, out of everything you've written, how much of it has been edited? Because, that's the $1 million question.
That's a great question. So, it's edited, but not, I don't credit an editor, because I don't employ one. So if you want, we can talk later if you're really interested.
Right.
But it goes through a lot of pre-readers, and it's one of the things that I'm really fortunate about with the people that I collaborate with as a letterer, is that they respect my work as a writer as well, and they take interest in it. So primarily, first of all, obviously it goes through my wife. She's the main reader, and she's really good with picking up like character beats and character moments. And so she'll be reading stuff, and she'll say, I don't think this person would do this here, or this character, right? They're not people. I don't think this character would do this here. They would do something else. So we talk about stuff like that. Or she's really, really, really good at dialogue. Like, most of the time, when I give her scripts for Crown and Anchor, she's like, okay, I'll draw this, but when you're lettering it, we're gonna like sit down and role play it through because I understand those characters a lot better now, but I didn't know a whole lot at the start.
So wait, you roleplay the characters?
Yeah.
That's a unique way of editing. I never thought of doing that actually.
And so, go ahead.
Sorry. No, that's a really interesting idea. It's almost
Yeah.
like you're playing like a video game. Like I beat his video games and Miles Morales. Like I loved it. Like I sat there, like listened to all the character beats, everything about it, and just like hear that you're like role playing a comic to like get the beats and the feel and the emotion. It's just great because at the same time, writers, we're sitting there and we're hearing the characters in our head. But when you see it in person, you're like, okay, this is how I know this character. This is how I want them to talk. But they also need to act this way also. So my next question would be is, if this ever got like to film or TV, do you have any actors in mind that you would love to see them portray your creations?
Yeah. Are we talking specifically about Pilgrim's Dirge?
A little bit of everything.
Anything?
Yeah.
All right. So I found the easiest way to get started, especially with these two newest books, Emulator and Pilgrim's Dirge, was to essentially do like celebrity lookalikes for character design. So for Emulator, I gave Emiliana references for. Okay, hold on. So the dad is John Krasinski.
Okay, I can see that.
And there was one, like a really, really early version she sent me. I was like, this is literally just John Krasinski. Like, you need to make it look different. We're going to get sued. So that was funny. The kid, the main character, Cal, is Noah Jupe, I think his name is. He's the kid in A Quiet Place. Because I think I watched that and I was like, this is the father and son from my book. Like, it just worked really well.
Okay, I can see that now. I can see that.
And I don't remember if there's anybody else. I think all the other kids were, like, I just gave descriptions. And then for Pilgrim's Dirge, again, one of the things we were taught is when you're writing, because I did a lot of film writing courses too, they said, write the film with the actor you want to portray in mind, because you kind of already know, their speaking cadence and stuff. And honestly, the person that I would want to play Orin would be, oh, now I'm blanking on his name. Hold on. No, it's not coming. The actor who plays Finn from the Star
John
Wars.
Boyega.
Yeah,
John Boyega, yeah.
I was thinking
That's
Will
who it
Smith
was.
actually when I was
Okay,
reading
yeah.
the book, and I thought like, maybe you might have gotten some influences from him, especially in his role in I Am Legend, when he played Robert Neville in that movie, and just dealing like with being alone and like trying to survive with a dog, and all that.
That's a great callback. I don't think that's ever crossed my mind. Probably subconsciously, but it was definitely, I said, draw him like John Boyega because that's who I.
He kind of does look a little like John Boyega.
Yeah, looking at the art right now, he does look very John Boyega.
And then for Crown and Anchor, because we don't want that to be a live action. Our dream would be that it would be like an anime kind of like Avatar: The Last Airbender.
Nice.
And it would be, I think his first name is Jamie. Jamie Bell would be Heb. Jamie Bell was the lead actor in Turn, Washington Spies. Have you ever seen that? It was an AMC. It's fantastic. If you haven't seen
No,
go
I
watch
haven't.
it. Revolutionary War, like spy series. It's awesome. It's super
Wait, what's it called? I think I might have heard of it.
Turn, Turn.
Was it on Showtime or something like years ago?
I don't know. It's an AMC production, so maybe it gets to Showtime. I'm not sure.
Oh, there it is. It's on Netflix right now.
It's on Netflix right now, yeah. That's the easiest way to find it. And then for everything else, I think we always go back and forth on who we want to do certain things. I don't remember anybody else besides that one, but yeah. Can I jump back to the editing question?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, sure.
Because I don't think I quite answered that as I would like. So Laird takes the first pass, and then I have a small group of other writers that I collaborate with who take another pass. So you'll see like Christian Herrera is credited in both because he did a marvelous job. There's a flyer. A marvelous job pre-reading both and giving feedback. Grant Stoy, who does side quests also, because he doesn't have enough on his plate already, he decides to read my stuff as well and give feedback. I think that's mostly it. And they give really specific critiques as well. Like Christian gave a lot of great stuff about kind of making plot progression make sense, right? Like he would say, I understand that this needs to happen, but again, this isn't like a good enough catalyst. There needs to be something else. This person wouldn't do that. You're basically just making them do that to force the narrative. And then Grant gives really good stuff too about like character interactions and making that feel authentic. And then the ultimate editor is honestly just the lettering process. And I've talked about this before, and I've heard other creators who letter themselves, like John Layman, who does Chew, talked about this a lot in earlier interviews, and he says he letters and he never ever changes what is on his script versus what's on the page. And I thought about that for a long time because I change stuff all the time in Crown and Anchor and Emulator. I basically rewrote it and stuff as I was going through it. Not fully, that's an over-exaggeration. But with Pilgrim's Dirge, because I had never really done inner monologue before, there was a lot of back and forth to make it consistent and coherent. And for now, what I do is when I'm writing a page, or now when I'm going back and preparing issue 2 for Mateo, I kind of say, what is the theme that he wants to be talking about or thinking about to himself? And then, because I kind of want to tell dual stories, right? He's saying something, but he's thinking something else, or in the quiet times he's thinking about something else. And so it's setting up, he's going to be analyzing this aspect of his past, his life, his present, the situation he's in, whoever he's talking to, whatever. And then when I see the page and I see what the emotions are, when I see how the body language is, I get a better sense of the tone. Is he being terse? Is he upset? Is he being more verbose because he's trying to steer the conversation away from what's happened, and so he's trying to kind of lighten the mood and be more jokey and kind of skirt the issue. So that was an interesting experience with Pilgrim's Dirge #1, where a lot of the dialogue is all the same, and a lot of the early stuff is the same. Like the first 5 pages, that is what was in the script. But later on, with the other conversations and trying to world build and get his past set up and get his quest set up and all this stuff, really was just seeing the art and saying, whatever I wrote before, I can't use, unfortunately. And then the main culprit for that is, when I write, I'm very lazy because I'm going to letter it. So I think, well, I don't need to figure it out right now. And then the other problem is that I wrote all these stories thinking that my wife Alaire would illustrate them, meaning that I could be really loose, and then when she's starting page 5, I could go, oh right, so what I actually want here is this, right? And then I could just say it out loud rather than have to get to the nitty gritty. Because I've seen other writers' scripts. I've seen, how Kieran Gillen scripts. I've seen Hickman scripts. I've seen other people that I work with, their scripts. And some of these people, they write like half a page for a panel. I'm like, that's too much, because I want to give my artists room to breathe and have fun and play and stuff. But now it's coming back to haunt me. So I have to figure out a better way when I'm collaborating with somebody who's not literally, 5 feet away working at their computer with me.
I mean, sort of like a duet. I mean, between two singers. I feel when it comes to like an artist and a writer in comics, like it just has to click,
Yep, and the philosophy I have with that is, as a letterer, I feel like I do my best work when people say, I trust you, I will accept what you give me. That's always the fear, is that I can't really let loose, because if I'm going to let loose and then they're going to have all these notes, I'm going to have to just redo it. So when my collaborators say, I've hired you for a reason, I trust your vision, go and have fun, do your best work, that's when I'm like, all right, I'm going to do all this stuff, I'm going to try things I've never done before, I'm going to use these colors, I'm going to set up palettes, like actually take time to set up palettes for sound effects and stuff and not just rush through it. Not that I do that too much. And so I want to give my artists the same freedom, because, like, I don't remember, somebody at some point quoted or tweeted, like, the ratio of how much is actually art versus like, writing and blah, blah, blah. And they're doing all the heavy lifting, right? I know how long it takes to draw a comic page because I see how long it takes my wife to draw a comic page. And I know how long it takes to write and letter because that's what I do. And it's very skewed, right? These people who champion writers to the moon, like, you gotta rethink how comics are made. And so I just said to each of them, I said, if there is something specific that I want, it will be made very clear in the script through bolding or whatever. But I said, this is for you. I hired you for a reason. Have fun, and don't be concerned about like fitting dialogue into a panel or whatever. Like, I can make that work. I've done that enough now that I can make things work. I can either rewrite or I can, break some lettering rules or whatever. But I said, I want you to do your best work. And I think with both of these issues, with Emulator and Pilgrim's Dirge, like, they really knocked out the park.
Nice.
No, just want to commend you guys for everything you're doing. It looks great. The Kickstarter's doing fantastic. I checked it last night. You guys are $50 away from $4,000. That's freaking awesome.
5,000.
Oh my God! I apologize. 5,000.
Yeah, we're so close.
That's freaking awesome, dude.
Yeah, we're so close.
And speaking of the,
it's
go ahead.
exciting. Go ahead.
And speaking of the Kickstarter, where can we find? We can go straight to Kickstarter and all that, and it's on your Twitter page, correct?
Yeah, the easiest way is just to go to pilgrimsdirge.com, all one word. It forwards you to the campaign, and everything is there.
Awesome. The one thing I want to ask and stuff is that, like, when I sign up for the Kickstarter, can I get like a signed copy like as soon as like this is made?
Yeah, of course.
I would love a signed copy. This is awesome.
Yeah,
like,
of course.
It was great because, like, I was telling my friends last night, they're like, oh, what do you do for work? I was like, I write video game reviews and I talk to people. They're like, what else can you say? And I was like, I can't say much more. and it's great. And I was like, yeah, we're doing this project. Here's the Kickstarter and stuff. And, like, that's all I can say. And, like, me and Brian got the press release from you. And, like, we're looking at everything over. And I'm just like, I was like, oh my God, this is awesome. And one of my buddies just goes, what are you looking at? I was like, redact. You'll see in a couple of minutes. It was just great. Like, we've had conversations where, like, we talk to people like, okay, you can't mention anything we talked about until the embargo. So I just think it's pretty cool that, like, Brian always says, like, our hard work is paying off. And it is. Like, your hard work's paying off, though, too, Toben. That's what I'm just trying to get at. Writers are always told all the time, writing's going to get you nothing.
Exactly.
I'm pretty sure writing goes a far way in life.
I mean, without writing, like, how are you gonna, like, achieve goals and, like, all this stuff? Without writing, how are you gonna get inspiration? It's even, like, without writing, how are you gonna watch your favorite TV program?
That's right.
Writing's like the lifeblood of, like, communication, ladies and gentlemen. It's just, you can't count us out, It's like, how else do you think the mainstream news gets their news from? Writers.
How do you think people get their reviews?
Yeah.
Yeah. How do we know what other media to take in? No, that's exactly right. I feel like it's just a situation now where, we've gone to school for it, but so many people can just say, "Oh, I'm a writer," because I can pick up a laptop and do that. And so I think there's an underappreciation of how well it takes to be a competent writer. How much work it takes to be a competent writer. And I mean, I have 2 degrees and I'm working on a doctorate, and I still don't feel like a competent writer. So, it comes and goes.
Well, so I'm looking at the Kickstarter right now, and you're like at 3,932. You're like right at 4,000, man.
Oh yeah, you guys would be in the States. That's why you're seeing different numbers. Huh?
Oh, okay.
Oh.
Okay.
There you go.
Canadian,
That's
U.S. and
the
Canadian.
trickiness. Yeah.
Gotcha.
But I just showed
Go ahead.
I mean, I just showed the Kickstarter on the page for everyone to see in case anyone was wondering. And yeah, it looks really awesome. I mean, like, over, at least according to US, it's like 3,932 over the goal, which was like 2,793. It's amazing, man.
Yeah, we've had a really great response to just the series in general. And it's weird, right? You'll listen to other professional writers, and, like, I think of Jim Zub, if you know Jim Zub, who wrote Skull Kickers and Wayward, and he does a lot of stuff at Marvel. And I remember listening to him because he was the kind of guy that I looked to as a Canadian and as kind of a really scrappy writer trying to find space for himself. He always talked about how, what you see on the shelf is such a narrow percent of what he actually produces. And to actually make it, as much as I hate that term, make it in comics, because I feel like that kind of doesn't really exist anymore with crowdfunding as a platform. To make it in comics, like, you really have to have lightning strike. And I'm not saying that Pilgrim's Dirge is that for me, but looking at everything that I've done to this point, and maybe again it's also just the more you produce, the better you actually become. So maybe that's part of it, right? You're finally playing a show out of the basement, so you're probably improving rather than continuing to play shows in the basement or just practice in the basement. So the response to this is wild. Like, we've had more backers on this project than probably almost Emulator and Crown and Anchor combined. That's not totally true, but we're getting close. Definitely Crown and Anchor, and that was our biggest one before. And it's weird to say, but like, I don't really get it. I don't really know what aspect of it is working, and so it's nice to hear you compliment the writing, because one of the fears with branching out away from Allaire as an artist was, are people actually going to like me as a writer, or are they just reading Crown and Anchor because of the art? So I think that there's a little bit of that realization happening, that like maybe I'm getting it together at this point. But we also just worked really hard on this one, doing a lot of things that we hadn't done before, putting together a video, which I did not do on Emulator, different rewards, different add-ons, things like that, just trying to make it more of what I think people look for in a Kickstarter. Emulator was very bare bones by design, because that was very much an experiment, but I don't know, it doesn't make sense when we wake up and check the numbers of how many people are following the project. They haven't backed it yet, right, but they follow it. We have over 300 people following still, and only,
wow,
I think it's around like 50 have actually pledged. So like, that doesn't make sense to me, because that's just like huge numbers for somebody who hasn't really done anything other than just letter books for the past, what is it? It's 2021. So it'll be about 6 years next month that I've been lettering. And like, I've taken it really slow, doing my own work. I've written a lot, but I don't have time to really put together Kickstarters. Like, it does take a lot of effort and whatnot. So it's cool to see it happen. It's kind of nerve-wracking, but it's exciting, because if, you know, number one goes this well, then hopefully number two will be maybe a little bit better, and then a little bit better. And that's what's cool to see about Grant's progress on SideQuest, is number one launched, and I don't know if you saw that, if you were following it, but he was at the day of, and he wasn't funded yet. And then it was, because it was around March or April of 2020, and Kickstarter said, because of the pandemic, everybody gets an extra week for free. And if that hadn't happened, his first issue wouldn't have been funded. So like, that in itself is a miracle. And then issue 2 had more backers, and then issue 3 had more backers. And so it's cool to see, like, people are getting behind these books and going up and up and up and up and stuff, and like, that's what this is for. That's what these kind of things are for, is to say, hey, this is cool, come help out this creator, because his stuff or her stuff or their stuff is really cool.
I feel one thing that makes this, like, Pilgrim's Dirge is so great is that you know your audience, your corner in the market, and you just know, like, that people are craving, like, this sci-fi adventure. After everything that happened with the Disney sequels of Star Wars, and how, just being honest, we discussed that so many times about how people are very torn. And then Mandalorian came into effect. People are craving those Mandalorian type of stories nowadays, and this hits it right on the head.
Yeah, I'm always too timid to say, like, yeah, this is influenced by Star Wars, because I feel like that's too much of a giant. But I think you're right. I mean, I think of genre a lot. There's a reason why I picked these 2 books to go first. But specifically with Pilgrim's Dirge, I thought no one's really doing sci-fi in comics, because with Stranger Things coming about, there's this resurgence of fantasy, right? Like, the books that I read most recently were Die by Kieran Gillen, and that, I mean, that's not even a comic, that is just a masterpiece of what literature in general can be. And then the last fantasy one that I can really think of that's like really long form was Birthright by Joshua Williamson. Now there's a couple more Sword and Sorcery ones, and then you have, you know, Conan and stuff like that. But I thought, no one's really doing sci-fi. Everyone's kind of doing, I feel like there's a crime noir horror resurgence in the indie scene. Not a problem, but like, that's not mine. Actually, I have a couple of those written, but
not your style.
Yeah, not really. So I'm more of like, I just want to write quests, and I want to send parties on adventures and stuff like that, right? And I'm not really interested in like the nitty gritty of the seedy underbelly of different towns and whatnot. So again, it's one of those things where if this is successful because there's a gap in the market, predicting that a year before I release the Kickstarter, like that's not me, right? That's something else going on here that I can't take credit for. So it's tricky because another sci-fi book, and I hope you read it. If you haven't, definitely go check it out. It's Outer Darkness by John Layman. It was his follow-up after Chew, before he did Chew, the sequel to Chew, if you know of all that stuff going on.
I've heard
And
Chew.
Outer Darkness is basically Star Trek, but like a cult. So instead of laser beams and matter transporters, they're sending like spells and exorcising demons and stuff like it's beautiful.
Wow.
And it only lasted 12 issues.
I think my sister would like a comic like that. She's like into that kind of thing.
Definitely read that.
What's it called again?
Outer Darkness.
Outer Darkness. Yeah, I think I'll take a look at that.
And I found out today, if we want to throw some mud, I found out that it was Robert Kirkman specifically that was the one who canceled it because it was through Skybound. And
What?
he's like, there's no market for this, and he shut it down. And now,
why would he do that?
What are you doing? Like, we all don't want just your work, Kirkman. Come on, like you're great, but
I mean, your Walking Dead stuff's awesome, man, but let other people shine. Like, dang,
Dude,
man.
Look at this art. Look at that.
yeah, Afu-chan is a
Look at that.
star.
It's
Holy
amazing.
crap.
Yeah, so that's one that I look to going, this is it was filling a niche in the market that wasn't there, and yeah, it's sad. Now I just want to go get it from the library again because it's just too good.
Yeah, it was with Image Comics too and everything.
Yeah, it was through Skybound. It was through the Skybound imprint.
Huh.
It's crazy. And then he had, because I did check into it, and people were asking like, well, take it to Kickstarter, but I think creators of that level don't really want to do Kickstarter because they don't want to deal with fulfillment. And,
Here it is, ladies and gentlemen.
You're just going straight to stores and stuff like that. So yeah, we may never get what was left to tell in that story, unfortunately.
Now I want to read
Maybe
this
you'll-
actually.
Dude, it's only 2 trades. I mean, yeah, unfortunately, it's only 2 trades.
And
but
apparently
it's
there's a crossover
unfair.
with Chew also. Like they had an Our Darkness / Chew #2.
Yeah, they do a crossover. That's another trade. So I guess there's technically 3 trades, and that crossover is really fun. If you've read Chew and you know.
Oh, I read some Chew.
How that universe works, like it's weird to mix the two of them together, but. I
But
don't know,
it
it's
works. I
ingenious.
mean,
Yeah.
I mean, especially with the fact that he's a psychopath and like he basically, if you for those of you constant listeners or viewers haven't read Chew, it's about this guy who he's a detective and he has like a innate, unique ability to eat stuff, and all of a sudden he remembers exactly where he like actually sees the memories vicariously through the things that this stuff has interacted with. So it could be like anything from a hot dog to a body part to anything, like just anything he eats. Like it just he sees like what the stuff that this object that he's eating has been through. It's really interesting. I mean, gross, but interesting.
Yeah, that's another comic that it deserves way more recognition than what it has.
And there was a rumor too that they were going to make an animated film out of that too. And Steven Yeun, who played Glenn Rhee in The Walking Dead, was going to voice the dude, and Robin Williams was going to voice Mason. I forgot the character's name, but for some reason
you're right.
yeah, and Felicia Day was going to be in it too, though. But then they canceled it. I'm like, what the freak? That could have been.
Because
Robin Williams passed away, yeah, and then like they're gonna have David Tennant from Doctor Who voice the guy, but then that went out the window.
Yeah, unfortunately, that would have been cool. But now we just got all of Robert Kirkman stuff again, right?
Well, we got the Invincible series on Amazon, so there's that.
Yeah, we just gotta love Kirkman. I remember.
But Kirkman's
I
cool
went to
though. I mean, I
Ross-
like Kirkman.
Yeah, I went to Ross Marquardt's panel, and some guy asked him and stuff because he voiced the Invincible. No, not the Immortal on Invincible. And he was like, one guy was like, well, at the end of you really got your butt kicked. And he goes, well, any kids around me? He's like, yeah, got my, and people are like, can we see you back? And he goes, you gotta keep watching. That's all I can say. Just watch season 2. And so, knowing the books though, the Immortal will be back, and he said it's gonna be bloodier than ever. And he said Kirkman is he's always on the animation, and everything he did for voiceover was actually from his house.
Oh, cool.
Wow.
Yeah, he said it was all from his house. They weren't in the studio at all. It was all from their houses over Zoom. And Kirkman was kind of like the Andrea Romano at the time, telling him like, okay, you're going to punch Omni-Man in the face, and he's going to get really pissed at you. And J.K. Simmons said over Zoom, he's like, what are you doing, Mark? And it's like, it was over Zoom, so it's pretty cool, actually.
That's fun.
Yeah.
J.K. Simmons is one funny cat.
Oh, dude, I saw so many Invincible cosplayers at Terrificon, to be honest.
It's good that it's blowing up. I mean, that book
It is.
It is the greatest superhero comic in the universe. I think that's what he started.
I mean, I like Invincible, really awesome comic, and Kirkman's great. I mean, like I like Kirkman. We're not gonna throw shade at Kirkman here, but
He works hard. He definitely has earned where he is today. That's
absolutely.
agreed.
Do you guys want to ask anything else, or do you want to talk anything else about Pilgrim's Dirge, or do you have to get going, or?
I don't have to get going. Are there more questions? I can keep that.
Oh, okay. I just didn't know. Brian, anything you want to ask, man?
I
was just gonna.
Nah, I mean, I don't got anything.
I'll just ask a question. So I just feel like with the reemergence of like Dune and everything, and like how the cinematic visuals and the sci-fi elements and everything, again, I feel like people, as soon as like, you're gonna go to a theater and like you'll see your Kickstarter, and people would be like, oh hey, you see Dune, but then like also people would think, yeah, but this Pilgrim Dirge book, did you read about this? I'm like, I love the guy's comments. It's like Mass Effect meets Destiny meets like Treasure Island, and Mass Effect's huge. It's blowing up again with the remaster.
Yeah.
Destiny's everywhere, and it's great to see like Goonies, Treasure Island stories come back into reality.
Thanks. Yeah, there's some, and I think that's why I like writing quest narratives. Is that it's just fun to get from point A to point B, and be as wacky as possible. Like I started being a dungeon master 2018, I guess, summer of 2018, and I never played D&D before, and playing it was a revelation to what actual storytelling is, like true collaborative storytelling, right? Where one person has an idea and then everybody else adds scoops of ice cream to the cone, and the DM has to make sure they don't fall over. Like that's what I love about comics as well. And I think as a letterer you don't see too much of it, but as a writer you are kind of the dungeon master, making sure that everybody plays nice and keep peace in the party and stuff. And so yeah, I like that you mentioned like the Goonies and stuff, because it's that, I think what I mean by comics needs more fun is like that kind of innocence, right? Where you can just be kind of goofy, you can be a little less serious, more tongue-in-cheek, but still actually portray a story that is meaningful and connects with people, and it's not just a bunch of gags strung together in 24 pages. There's a loose narrative, something like that.
Kind of reminds me a lot of Final Fantasy too, and I think that's why the Final Fantasy games do so well, because there's so much character development in these quests, like I said, these quest storylines, and you get to learn more about these characters, and they get to bond, and that's one of the reasons why I love Final Fantasy. The storytelling is great, especially Final Fantasy X. To me, that's like the ultimate hero's journey right there. It's about a entitled brat who is born basically with a spoon in his mouth, even though he has daddy issues, but he like when he's brought into a world that is so much different from his own, like he slowly but surely grows into this heroic and selfless character, and that's one of the things I like about it, and it's just that at the end, of course, he sacrificed. Well, I mean, I don't say he sacrifices himself though, but he has to go to save the ones that he loves. But then in the second game, he pretty much returns. But that was like one of my favorite Final Fantasies because of that whole the character development, and not just with him, but with the other characters too. They start to develop.
That's a great comparison. We actually, my wife and I, and two other friends, or another couple, we started the RPG book club in 2021 to offset some of the boredom of the pandemic, and that's what we started with, was Final Fantasy X.
Nice.
And digging into it, I mean, I don't know if we want to make this a Final Fantasy X podcast, but I probably could talk for another hour about it.
Oh yeah.
It's just masterful. And so I think it's interesting. I mean, it's always hard to pitch your comic by saying it's like this or it's like this, right? Like, I thought long and hard about the things that I put in there, and the reason that I chose the ones I did is because Mass Effect is for like the alien races that we'll meet. Destiny is just kind of for the aesthetic, and then Borderlands was like kind of for the humor, but I'm not really using that kind of humor. But it's like, how do you say something's humorous when it's for fans who like funny things, right? Like, whatever.
Yeah.
But because it's always really isolating too, because if you say, oh, if it's like Mass Effect and somebody had a really bad experience, they're gonna go, I don't like that. Yeah. Now I want to be like, yeah, issue 2. This is Final Fantasy X in space.
Or even like it kind of reminds me of J. Michael Straczynski, how he made Babylon 5, and it was kind of like a Casablanca in space.
Okay, that's cool.
Like with the meeting of the aliens in this neutral area, because it was like during a war, I think, and like all these aliens would just meet in this like neutral zone where they were not allowed to fight or stir shit up, and all that.
One thing I will say though is I love quest storylines because everybody can take something away from it. You have like your own favorite character, and also at the same time, that character over time you become them. Like playing Final Fantasy 15.
You live vicarious through these characters.
Yeah, you live vicariously through the characters. Final Fantasy 15, when it was first promoted, it was like a very regal knight story, and then like when you're playing it, it's just 4 dudes at a bachelor party. and then like
sure, I want to play that game now.
And like the way you get to the end and everything, and then Chapter 9 with like Luna Freya and like Noctis, it's just. You're like, okay, nope, okay, now we gotta save the world now. Something's going on. And it's just great because Nomura knows what he's doing with his storytelling. And that's the great thing about Final Fantasy is how every installment is a different world, different set of characters, but it all feels the same at the heart of it. It has heart. And that's what your books have. They have heart. And like you said, in a day and age where comics are just slapstick or they're very dark or they don't know what they want, movies like Shazam really stand out,
right?
Because it has heart,
It's lighthearted, yeah.
It's very lighthearted, but then there's also moments of tender darkness where you really show and exemplify that humanity isn't really like, oh no, there's a monster attacking us, but the real villain of the movie was his mom. She was like, I had you, I didn't know what to do with you. And to have David F. Sandberg actually showcase that in a comic flick about a kid, basically big meeting superheroes, was great. It was profound. It was what you needed.
There's a quote, and I don't remember who it's by. It's in my school notes somewhere. I can find it. But it essentially goes, and this is a really bad paraphrase, dragon stories don't, or I think it's fairy stories, because that's what Tolkien referred to them as, right? It's fairy stories. Not fairy tales, fairy stories. Anyways, something like fairy stories don't exist to tell kids that dragons exist. Kids already know that dragons exist. Fairy stories exist to tell kids that dragons can be defeated, or something like that.
Wow.
And I'll find it, and I can send it to Brian. He can pass it along. Again, this is another thing I think about a lot. Like, what is the purpose of the fiction that we create, and what is the messages that we're putting across? Because I do think that no matter what you do, there has to be some kind of moral. And I'm not saying that there's some like ham-fisted moral in Pilgrim's Dirge. Hopefully, there's something that somebody resonates or can find and resonate with. But as a writer, I kind of use each of my stories to do some kind of examination of something in my life. So, like I mentioned at the start of this, it's writing about isolation. It's writing about being a father. It's writing about expectations that are uncomfortable, but necessary, and then it's just, again, probably most of what Pilgrim's Dirge is about is things in your past that you're not proud of, but that you eventually have to take ownership for. And so if that can help, if reading this story can help somebody else go, maybe I need to go apologize to somebody, or maybe I need to, take action in some way to become that little bit better, I think then I would be completely satisfied that this has done what I intended it to do. Because it already has for me, right? Like, getting it out has been helpful. And I know that there's other fiction that I read, like I love Seven to Eternity from Rick Remender. And whenever I read that book, I'm like, I gotta be a better person. Because that's what the book is about. Like, don't be a butt. Be a good person. And that's essentially, or that's not essentially, that is especially what needs to happen in the world today, right? So if fiction, if this these new titles of fiction, movies, comics, whatever, can help people go, yeah, I'm going to help out my neighbor, my fellow man, whatever the terminology you want to use, like, that's what fiction should be doing.
Not the other way around.
Yeah, and then the quest, I think, is just there to tap into people wanting to see where it goes, right? I want to see this quest have a beginning, middle, and end. So there's a lot of layers that I think about when I start structuring a story like that. And then in most cases, it is when it's done that you look back and go, oh, that's actually what I was saying during these 10, 5, however many issues, that you only recognize once you're actually done it. So.
Nice.
Brian, do you have anything else you want to add?
Well, I mean, like, nah, it's just like, that's awesome. I mean, like, because, like, I feel like with writing especially, it's very therapeutic, I feel. And I think I told Brendan this one time too. It's like, whenever I write something, and it's like, I think it's just a way for me to, like, it's like self-counseling almost, like, whether you write about, like, something that you went through. And I noticed that a lot of my stories back in college were about what I went through in high school, and, like, just going through all that. And, like, it was sort of like, I kind of felt like it was also getting back at some of the people in high school who, I had to deal with. But, also it was therapeutic. It was a way to get it off my chest. And I felt like it was the same deal with several Holocaust survivors. Actually, one time I met one back in my high school, and he had a really interesting story. I think he wrote a book about his experiences. And, I even saw the tattoo on his, that they had on his arm, and it was just like, damn, And, like, even, like, with Eli Wiesel, I don't know if any of you read the book called Night, I think it was called. Yeah. That is a powerful story. Like, and, I think my English teacher at the time talked about that story, and she was, like, saying that, writing is a way that they could get it off their chest. It's a way they could deal with it. And, kind of come to grips with what happened. And it was just like, wow, I never thought of it that way. But now, looking back, it's like, that makes sense, as to why, why for me it was like writing was very therapeutic, because I think about that, And like with what you mentioned too. What's up, Brendan?
Well, I mean, Brian, I can agree with you. I mean, we all love Superman and Lois, and, like,
yes.
One of the things that makes the show great is the brilliance of Lois Lane, of, like, how she's actually a good journalist. Like, we're journalists, we love to do it.
Yes.
But at the same time, getting into this business, I didn't really know what it was. Like, I just thought, as a reviewer, here, let's do it. Now I know how to edit. Now I know how to, like, review. I have quotes, And I just, at the same time, our chief always tells us that journalism, you're getting the news out, but you're also getting the truth out. And when I wrote an editorial about Superman and Lois and why I love the show, I literally felt like a 5-year-old kid reading my Superman comic. And
right.
It was great. And I just loved it. Like, I come from a family very blue collar. My dad's like, get a job or go to college. And here I am, a reporter, and everyone's like, oh, it's not going to make you a lot of money. But Brian told me, it doesn't matter about the money. It matters if you're happy. And doing this, I've never been more happier in my life.
Yeah. What is the saying? You enjoy what you do and you'll never work a day in your life. Yeah. That's also very poorly paraphrased. I don't remember the specifics. I remember the emotion of these words. But yeah, it's true. It's true. And I think, I don't know if I want to get into this. This would be another hour. But I think a lot of people, when they read comics or anything in general, whether it's film, video games, whatever, if something makes them feel something, they go, oh, I want to do that, right? I want to make that, or I want to create that. And then the other half of it is they look at, well, I'll stick to comics for this, because comics is such a niche thing. We know people like Brian Bendis and Jonathan Hickman and that kind of stuff, and to us, they're famous. But you ask anybody on the street who Brian Bendis is, they're not going to know, right? They're not. Jim Zub said in an interview that another creator said to him that there are less professional comic creators in the world than there are professional baseball players. And I don't know if that's a staggering statistic. I don't know if there's a lot of baseball players, but like people who read comics know a lot about comics, but people who don't read comics don't know a lot about comics. And so I think that there's this skewed perception, especially in the comics industry, where you can make a lot of money because there's so much potential. But again, the reason why these people make so much money, and I don't even know if they make so much money if they're so widely known, is just because of how like distribution works, right? You have one writer on Avengers, and Avengers sells however many copies per month. Yeah, a lot of people are probably going to know the writer because it's being dispersed through all the channels. That's what I mean by that. What that whole segue was for is to say people will go into comics thinking they're going to make money because of their perception as a consumer of comics, but that's not actually how comics work.
Nah.
Unless you've put in the time to make a name for yourself at Marvel, DC, whatever, and then you go and create something that you own and you have a way to take in most of the revenue, that's probably how you're going to make most of the money, right? If you've heard the cost breakdowns of, like, Hickman, when he was writing Fantastic Four and Avengers, made less money than when he was making East and West, just because of how the industry works, right? Marvel takes so much more of a cut, Image, you take more of a cut, that's just how it works. But you're not going to get those numbers again either, right? You're not going to sell 20,000 issues through a Kickstarter unless you're, I don't even know who's running Kickstarters who would sell that much money, or to sell that many comics.
Mm-hmm.
So it's very much, like you said, it has to be a self-driven, like you got to find your passion, you got to understand it's a long road.
Yeah.
And at the end of the day, and this is something that I was talking to Lair about after Emulator, I was like, maybe people don't even want my stories. Like, maybe I'm just going to be a letterer, and I have to learn to be okay with that, despite having, you know, a hard drive full of stories going, oh, this stuff is so cool. It's just how it works. So if you can have the intrinsic motivation, if you want to get into psychology, intrinsic motivation to continue doing your hobbies rather than the extrinsic motivation of money or fame or readers or followers or whatever, then keep doing it, because that's ultimately what all this stuff is for. It's just explore passions and help yourself develop talents and stuff like that.
I want to just listen to you talk. Like, I want to
seriously, man.
Have you teach it. Like, I'm learning more about comics, about writing, and about being a better person than I've learned at all my 5 years of college.
Well, that's probably a blow against your institution more than anything else. But
You're not wrong.
It's weird. Like, when I started as even before I was lettering, when I was writing, I listened to a bunch of podcasts, right? Podcasts like your guys', podcasts like, I don't know, Sketch podcast. That's probably the only other one I remember at this point. And I would listen to writers and artists talk, and I would try to learn as much about the industry as I could, thinking that it would help me like break in, right? Again, I hate that term because you don't really break in, you just
do.
To earn, I feel like, the place. And so I know a lot about how it works, and that's made me realize kind of how gross the comics industry is. And I don't mean that, but with all of the allegations and stuff that keep coming to light. There's definitely that part of it, but it's just very unrewarding unless you love the genre and you love telling the stories in the genre. And so I understand in my own creative process that if I'm doing this for money, there's a whole lot of other things that I could do for money. And this is really,
yeah, exactly.
I want to share these stories with people, and that's why I love Kickstarter, because if I really don't want to put anything up front, there's no cost to me to run the Kickstarter, except maybe an hour or two. But if people if the idea connects with people and they put their money down, then that's a huge show of trust and an affirmation that there is something good worth pursuing here in terms of the idea that I have of some kind of story. But again, I could be doing any number of things to actually be lucrative with a career, but in comics, it really does have to be a labor of love and a lot of sacrifices. And appreciating what people have done before you and respecting that and saying, I'm going to learn from that, but I'm going to find a place where I can basically plant a tree that will hopefully draw more people to it, instead of just like, oh, well, my book is Batman, but now instead of a bat, he's a crow. Although that's already been done. You know what I mean? Like, how many times can we recycle it before something else? Yeah, it's tricky. It's weird, but it's cool. Like, listening to you both talk about journalism is really inspiring because, like, that's not a venue that I have interest in. But again, it reaffirms that if you find that niche and you have that passion, then that's where you should grow and develop.
Well said, man.
All right, thanks.
So we're gonna close out. Do you have any final thoughts?
Yeah, let's see. So we'll go through all the funky stuff. So we have 6 days left of the Kickstarter. Okay, it's fully funded, so every pledge will be honored. The book is done. I mean, you guys read the full beginning and middle and end of issue 1. It's done. It's colored. The only thing that's remaining is the thank you page, which is a reward on Kickstarter. I forgot to mention in all of the press I've done for this, if you don't back this for any other reason, back it for the credit page, because this is the best credit page that I've ever designed, and I want all the people to see it. I'm looking at it right now, and I'm just like, it's just so good. So back it for the credit page. It's worth it. There's a whole lot of other rewards through the Kickstarter, pilgrimsdirge.com. You can find all the things there. If you are in the U.S., then you are getting a little bit of a break because it's all in Canadian, so you're getting a little bit of a break on conversion that way, so that's great. And beyond that, find me at Toben Racicot on Twitter. That's where I post not a whole lot, but that's the easiest way to get a hold of me. And yeah, thank you both for having me. This was a lot of fun. I really appreciate the time and the questions and the interest and the I guess the pats on the back of how good.
Yeah, it's a pleasure, man. We hope to have you back.
That'd be great.
Yeah, dude. Absolutely.
That'd be fantastic. Yeah, this was a blast.
All right, awesome, man. Well, thank you all for viewing the Earth 16 Comics Wire podcast. You can find our podcast on Twitter at Earth 16 Podcasts, and same on Instagram at Earth 16 Podcast or Earth 16 Comics. And you can also find me personally on Twitter at Brian of Earth 16. And Brendan, where can we find you?
You can find me at Brent vs. Reviews, and I'm gonna go watch Suicide Squad, and I'll have a video review up later on.
Shoot, I want to watch the Suicide Squad also. And Toben, where can we find you once more?
Yeah, it's at Toben Racicot on Twitter, or racicot.art/Toben is where you can see more lettering work. But yeah, racicot.art is probably the easiest way. You can sign up for the newsletter. Alaire and I do a lot of fun stuff on the newsletter, so that's the best way to keep in touch with what's going on.
Awesome, man. Well, thanks for being on, bro. So thank you all for listening and watching. This is Brian from Earth 16.
It's Brent vs. Reviews.
Do I say something?
Yeah.
This is Toben Racicot, the writer of Pilgrim's Dirge on Kickstarter now.
All right. Yeah.